You've probably heard of this hand being called the Doyle Brunson or Texas Dolly, but do you know how it actually became the most legendary hand in poker? 1976, Binion's Horseshoe, Las Vegas. The World Series of Poker looked very different from what it is today. There were no massive fields or million-dollar payouts spread across dozens of places. Just 22 players, each putting up $10,000 to enter the main event, creating a $220,000 prize pool where only one player would get paid. By the time the tournament reached its final stage, it came down to Doyle Brunson and Jesse Alto, two experienced players battling heads up for the World Championship. During that final match, a hand developed that at the time seemed like just another dramatic finish to a high-stakes tournament, but would later become one of the most famous moments in poker history. Alto looked down at Ace-Jack, a strong holding, especially heads up, while Brunson was holding Ten-Deuce, a hand that in most situations would be folded instantly. But heads-up play is different, ranges are wider, and Brunson decided to continue. The flop came, Ace-Jack 10, giving Alto two pair right away, and putting him in a commanding position, while Brunson connected only with the 10, leaving him far behind. At that point, everything pointed toward Alto closing out the tournament. But the turn brought a deuce, improving Brunson to two pair and suddenly giving him a real chance in the hand. The chips went in, Alto called, and with one card left, he was still the favourite to win the World Series of Poker. Then the river came. Another deuce. In a single moment, the entire hand flipped. Brunson made a full house, tens full of deuces, and with it won the 1976 World Series of Poker main event. At the time, it felt like a strange and unlikely ending, the kind of hand you remember for a while and then move on from. But this one didn't end there. 1 year later, in 1977, the World Series of Poker returned to Binion's Horseshoe, and while the event was still relatively small, it was growing. This time, 34 players entered the main event, each paying $10,000. Building a $340,000 prize pool with the same unforgiving structure as the year before. Winner takes it all, and once again, Doyle Brunson made it all the way to the end. But this time, the situation was different. In 1976, Brunson had been chasing his first world title. Now he was the defending champion, with the pressure of proving that his previous win wasn't just a one-time run. At the final stage, he found himself heads up against Gary Berland, an experienced and composed opponent who was now one step away from becoming world champion. And then, during that final match, something happened that almost sounds impossible. At some point in the hand, Brunson looked down at his cards and saw Ten-Deuce, the exact same hand that had won him the World Series of Poker just 1 year earlier. In poker, coincidences happen, but moments like this immediately stand out. The same player, in the same tournament, at the most important stage, holding the same hand again. The hand played out, the board developed, and just like in 1976, Brunson stayed in. And as the cards were revealed, the pattern repeated itself. By the end of it, Ten-Deuce had improved into a full house. And with that, Doyle Brunson won the 1977 World Series of Poker main event. Back-to-back world championships, both decided by the exact same hand. At that point, it stopped being just a strange coincidence. Because once might be luck. But twice is when it becomes something else entirely. To really understand why this moment became so iconic, you have to understand who Doyle Brunson was at the time. Long before the bright lights of the World Series of Poker, Brunson built his reputation as a road gambler, traveling across Texas and the southern United States, playing in private games where the stakes were high and the conditions were often unpredictable. These weren't structured casino environments, these were underground games where trust was limited and where the risk sometimes went far beyond just losing money. In those games, experience mattered more than anything. You learned to read people, to stay calm under pressure, and to make decisions without hesitation. Brunson spent years in that world, developing a style that was patient, fearless, and incredibly difficult to break. By the time the World Series of Poker came around in the 1970s, he was already considered one of the best players in the game, not just because of talent, but because of everything he had been through to get there, which is what makes the story of Ten-Deuce so interesting. Because this wasn't an unknown player catching a lucky break. This was one of the toughest, most experienced professionals in poker, winning back-to-back world championships on the biggest stage. And somehow, both of those wins came from the exact same hand. That contrast is what turned the moment into something people couldn't forget. And that's where the hand took on a life of its own, because Ten-Deuce isn't just a bad hand. It's one of the worst hands you can be dealt in Texas Hold'em. The cards aren't connected, they're not suited, and in most situations, it's an automatic fold without a second thought. And yet, this was the hand that decided back-to-back world championships. Over time, players started to associate it with Doyle Brunson. It became known as the Doyle Brunson hand, something that almost no other player in poker history has. A specific hand permanently tied to their name. You'd hear it at tables, in commentary, in broadcasts. Every time someone picked up Ten-Deuce, there was always that reference in the background, that reminder of what happened in 1976 and 1977. Most hands in poker are forgotten almost instantly. This one never was, because it's the kind of thing that shouldn't happen. And yet it did, twice.